Yeah, 10 years since that project when I was like, wow, like you can use these tools of design to like really affect positive change on people.
Yeah.
And now I actually get to do it, so I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
Welcome to Design Drives, your audio experience about what, how, and why design drives things forward. A podcast hosted by Sebastian Gier, together with forward-thinking design practitioners from around the world.
So in this episode I talk with Chris Lovin, Experience Design Lead at athenahealth and teacher at the Austin Center of Design. We learn why he always wanted to create positive impact using design and why his current role in the healthcare space helps him to help others using design, improving their experience. We learn about his personal transition from industrial design now to fully interaction design and the process in between. Working in a consulting space at Frog and in-house at Honeywell, Mixer Design Group and Payway Electronics. We also learn why his work in the smart home area helped him to connect both disciplines, learning and practicing both industrial and interaction design at the same time, and how connected products blur the difference between both disciplines, which made us think if there is an agile industrial design process in the future, thanks to 3D printing, that will even out the iterative times and the iterative cycles between digital, which can often be faster, and physical industrial design, which can sometimes be slower. In addition, we think about a strategic layer of design that connects industrial and interaction design and create theories of vertical and horizontal design aspects. Again, this is a collaboration between IDSA, the Industrial Designers Society of America, and Design Drives. I hope you enjoy the episode. All right, we are here with Chris Lovin. Pretty exciting to speak to you. So you are Experience Design Lead at athenahealth, right? And then you also have some work in education as well. So we will dive into that. So maybe for the people who don't know you, a little shout out on how do you got into design and what you're doing at the moment.
Yeah, so I graduated from Arizona State back in 2001, and I studied industrial design. And while I was there, I also had an exchange at the FA in Cologne, and
KIST, right?
Yeah, KIST, yeah, which was amazing. I'll talk more about that later, but that was how I got into design. I had met a friend's dad's roommate like a long time ago, and he was telling me about industrial design, and so I knew going into college that that's what I wanted to do, and felt pretty fortunate to do that. And then I've worked in music equipment and ID consulting, and then recently with Frog and interaction design, and then now working in the healthcare space.
Can you unpack this a little bit, maybe in a bit more detail?
Yeah.
Some of the places, because it's pretty exciting, I think, for people to hear.
Yeah. So my first job out of college was working at PV Electronics, which was a music equipment manufacturer in Meridian, Mississippi. And I think they were, for a long time, the largest supplier of music equipment. And so they have all kinds of things from microphones to guitar amplifiers to keyboards and mixers and all of these things. And I was working there for a while. I was like one of two designers. And we were working on all kinds of things, and it was a really like great place to be a junior designer because I got to work on probably 200 things while I was there. And whenever I finally left PV, I was ready to move on and come back to a city, and so I left there to go to Austin and work for a small industrial design consultancy, and they do industrial design and mechanical engineering. And it was all around packaged electronics. So our clients were people like Dell and Hewlett-Packard. We did some work for Fiat and some like other, some medical device companies. But it was really like not a strategic design. It was more of implementation. So it was taking things and immediately getting them ready, designed for manufacture. And then I was there for 10 years. And then I wanted to... I started to explore software. I had met John Calco and talked to him a lot about ways to take my industrial design skills and start to apply those to broader problems. And I was looking into an interaction design role because it felt like a nice kind of complementary space where you could take a lot of the same skills of industrial design and that systematic thinking and apply it to a different problem. And that, with his encouragement, I started to look for more software-focused roles, and that's how I landed at Honeywell, because they were starting up a connected home group in Austin. So I was working on both the industrial design of the products and then also the app experience. And then from there, it kind of took off in the software direction, and went to Frog and worked as a senior interaction designer on all kinds of things, from ride-hailing apps to oil and gas projects, and some surgical UIs. So it was a really interesting and intense, experience. And from that, I really started to enjoy the medical side of things. I wanted to do that full time, and that's when I moved over to Athena to do more helping people with healthcare.
Yeah.
So.
We were chatting earlier about that, the smart home topic, and how it actually is a great place to combine these two worlds, right? Industry and interaction design, because they both influence itself, and it's so tightly connected, right?
Yeah.
So, can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think I never understood how a software experience could really shape a hardware experience until I was in that space. A good example of that is I was working on a water leak detector. So it's something that you put next to your boiler, or you keep under your sink, and it is always looking for water leaks. And then if it finds one, it sends an alert to your phone, and then also makes an alarm that you can hear audibly. And it was really interesting because of how little battery they wanted it to use. They wanted it to last, I think, 2 or 3 years without a battery change, because people put these in very awkward locations. And they were thinking okay, well, we want it to last 2 years. We want it to check in with the cloud this many times and do all. And then when I was working with engineers, they realized that it was going to need 4 AA batteries, and it was going to be this huge thing. And then I made a model of it, and they were like, "Oh, we can't do that, because you can't put that under anything. You can't put that next to your water heater. You can't do these things because it's too big." So we had to start working on the requirements and say, okay, well, maybe it checks in once a day, and maybe it only lasts 1 year. And then we were able to take half the batteries out and then get to a package that was a lot more reasonable. But it really affected the software experience, because then you couldn't check in real time. You had to wait a day, to get the update. Unless something was wrong, it was detecting water, and then it would immediately send. But it would every day it would show you the temperature and the humidity, so that you knew it was still working. But that was an interesting problem to how do you show that something is working whenever it only comes alive once a day, and you only get this update once a day. And so how do you build confidence and do these things? And but because it really affected everything. It affected the size, it affected the app. It was really an interesting problem to work on.
Did you guys work also on unpackaging and mounting experience? Because this is another fascinating topic, I think, about smart home. Because I think one of the biggest points of friction at the moment is still the setup and mounting process, and getting into the space and knowing what do I need to connect to create what kind of experience. So.
Yeah, I didn't work a lot on the thermostats. I did kind of reskin one and made a new DLS for it. But working with the team who did a lot of the thermostat work, it really was incredible, how complicated it was to get all of the things configured and put up in the right location, because depending on everyone's system, which is different based on the manufacturer of the air conditioner and the make of the house and all of these things, you have all these different wires and there's no consistency, so you just have to know where to put things. And they're trying to guide it, and so now you have a phone and you're looking at this thermostat and these wires coming out of the wall, and you're trying to make sense of all these things. And it was really a difficult problem. I think it is still a big problem, and that needs to be fixed. But I think that's why contractors are so popular. Even Nest, you pay a fee and they'll come out and install your doorbell, or put your thermostat.
It's part of the service experience, right?
Yeah. Exactly. I think a lot of
business
people
dream
start
was-
it and then they get scared.
So it's intentionally it's like dark UX patterns,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, but I think there's definitely opportunities there to
Yeah.
make that a better experience.
So that's the question about like good design is good business, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want to have the people come out for the mounting process. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. Like, for us, a big problem was having consistency between the different devices, right? If you have a water leak detector and you have a doorbell and you have a camera and you have all these things, like, how do you make it feel like a consistent experience across all of these different products that have very different architectures and very different, hardware specifications?
Yeah. Did you guys work also on design language systems then?
Yeah, physical and digital.
Mm-hmm.
So we were working. They called it the Lyric DLS, and Lyric was the name of the app, and then the family of products. But yeah, it was a very kind of family-focused, like a common language of like sharp edges with these like nice soft surfaces, and like showing that duality. And a big part of it was making it feel like it was part of the home and not a gadget, but like to make it feel like something that you would actually want to display in your home.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting concept. It's something I think Google is doing really well right now with a lot of their smart home devices.
Yeah, thinking of this less of a utility, but more of something almost this decoration aspects, right?
Yep. Yeah, I think they really. Whenever I saw their stuff, I was like, "That's nice.
Right.
It's really nice."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What's also interesting, you worked also at Mixer Design Group,
Mhm.
right? And Honeywell. So you had these both perspectives on like in-house and consultancy and on the area of smart home and consumer products in that kind of space. So were there any interesting learnings on that?
Totally. Yeah. I think when you work as a consultant and you do something and you put your heart and soul into it, and then you give it over to the client, and then you never see it again. Like there's this like, wow, was it not the right thing? Like what happened? And then you find out when you go in-house that there's a million things that could have happened. They could have just changed their mind, or the guy whose project it was quit, or like all these things, and you get a lot more, I guess, perspective on how decisions are made, and I guess you start to take things less personally.
That's the way to look at it, right? Yeah.
Like, oh wow, it's amazing that anything gets made.
Yeah.
It's not just my things that don't get made.
Yeah. And so you started over back on industrial design, then you moved to interaction design. Sort of learning by doing in a way, right? How was that like, getting into that space?
It was really, I think it was harder than I expected. I think that's the ID hubris, right? There's like, we can do whatever, but I think that what I didn't know was how to approach digital systems with that same kind of systemic approach, and like how to build consistency and make sure that things were built from a strong foundation instead of just trying to fix like these point solutions. I think that was the biggest thing I had to learn, and I didn't properly learn that until I was at Frog. Because that was just so much of what we did all the time, like just starting and building a foundation and then fleshing things out.
Yeah, when you were saying interaction design, was it in the beginning also UX UI design, or was it more the tactile, let's say the industrial design interactions?
It was a little bit of both. At Honeywell, they didn't really have the different roles of like a visual designer versus an interaction designer. It was just kind of rolled up into one person. So I was doing a lot of the visual design of the app, and then also figuring out the architecture and things like that. And then as far as the experience on the device, like that was also something that I was trying to specify, like when lights come on or how things act or the sounds that it makes, like all those decisions. So that experience was a great kind of like transition into a purely digital world.
And then later on you were, I think after that you were joining Frog, right? Now you actually moved completely to UX UI design, right?
Yep. Yeah, there was always the hope that I would bring industrial design to Austin, because the Frog office in Austin doesn't do really any product design.
All right, got it.
Yeah,
All right.
so it's just in San Francisco and New York. So
Okay.
their hope, and the reason they wanted me to
So they hired
come on
you as a
board-
hybrid sort of,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, they were like, if we find the right client and the project's not too big, like then we could take this risk and then we can, figure it out and then we'll grow it from there. And as you know, I mean, working in consulting, like you can only work on the projects that come to you,
Yeah.
right? So those opportunities never happened.
Okay.
I think there was one good opportunity that happened like right as I was leaving Frog, but it was like a very like, I think we can sell them on that. Like it wasn't a really strong, case to be made. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so in the meantime, I got to really learn how to be an interaction designer. It was like sink or swim kind of thing. They immediately went into a big enterprise design problem where it was this big space and it had web interface and then also a tablet experience and a mobile experience and like all these different people were getting coordinated together and I was the only interaction designer and they're like, come on, let's go. And that's how you learn, I guess.
How big is the team in Austin, the Frog Design team?
There are 60 creative.
60.
60
quite
creative,
big.
and then another 20 kind of in like accounting and IT and some of the more support roles.
So how many interaction designers?
5 or 6 maybe.
Okay, what are the others then?
There's a lot of visual design. There's a lot of design technologists, so the engineering team. There is support roles like project managers, what they call an experience architect, which is like a product owner type of position. And there's also a lot of business strategy. That's the other part of the team, is
Okay.
that you would work a lot with, whenever they would staff a team, there's usually one person from each discipline. So you would have an interaction designer, a visual designer, a business strategist, a project manager, and then you have creative directors and some executives that kind of help, lead, I guess, the big, make sure the quality is there and that, everyone is delivering what was promised. But yeah, that seems to be, if it was a really big project, they would start to duplicate. But I think there was maybe, I can't imagine, I can't think of more than 6 to 10 interaction designers, like including interns and kind of in the flux there.
So what's I think also interesting, reflecting on your decision to go into interaction design. Do you miss any of the industrial design pieces?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I miss the craft. I think
craft,
most of all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I miss like drawing and just like really like laboring over details. I still get to draw, but it's a lot different now. Like it's more of like doing storyboards and like rough screen concepts, things like that. Like setting context and scenarios. It's not nearly as. It's just not the same. But it is. At least I still get to sketch and I still get to move my hand.
Wireframing. Right?
Yeah. It's not as sexy, but it is nice to, still like be able to say, oh well, I'm gonna wireframe this, on a phone in a hand in a car, and then you can still like work on it that way.
Just zooming out. Right?
Exactly.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
And then at athenahealth, can you tell a little bit about your role? Because you moved into health products, so it's a completely different space, right?
It is completely different. Yeah. So while I was at Frog, a few of my favorite projects were really in the healthcare space, and I knew that was something that I wanted to move into full time, and because I can't control really what I work on at Frog, I had to like say, okay, well, I'm going to make a stand and I'm going to go somewhere else. So when I went to Athena, what they do is they help people manage their electronic records. So this is something that really with the Affordable Care Act and a few other things that were happening in the late 90s, they were trying to move people away from paper records. Because if you go to a different doctor, like they don't know your health history, like they have to call the other doctor and then they fax things over, and it's a very like weird, slow, paper-based system. So what Athena is trying to do is to really pull people into electronic health records, and then they help physicians and medical practices schedule people and get them into the door, and then they also help them get treated for the right things. They look for drug interactions and a lot of these other things while they're in the office, and then they help with the managing the insurance and actually getting the doctor paid. So it's a really interesting kind of software as a service platform, where they're just helping doctors run their practice and get paid and actually get people to show up on time.
Yeah. So this whole topic about that Athena's Health is working off is really also connected to the public enabling, right? The government enabling, to work on that, right?
Yeah. They talk about they call it the iron triangle of healthcare, which is this idea of there's three things that you're always balancing, and that's the quality of the service that you're getting, how much access you have to a service, and then the cost of the service.
Yeah.
So, for us, it's really not an equal system, right? Because depending on who you are, where you live, and how much money you have access to different qualities of care than other people who might be living in a rural place that don't have any money, right? It's a very healthcare in America is very just lopsided, and it's a very fragmented, just not at all consistent, right? I mean, you can have totally different experiences from one doctor to another, in one city to another. So really what they're trying to do is to give people the tools to run their office and be able to serve people and to give a more consistent experience.
It must feel great as a designer to work in it, because it really takes away friction for people, right? To track their health records and so on.
Yeah. A lot of the reasons that doctors quit and that they leave private practice is because it is so hard to get paid. They have so much paperwork to do, and they have to do all these insurance submissions, and they're constantly dealing with that, and it takes away from what they really want to do, which is to help people, right?
Yeah.
So what Athena is doing is taking a lot of that work on so that they can focus on actually, providing care to their patients. So that was what I thought was, such an interesting, opportunity. And then because Athena is sitting in that space, and they're starting to work with these digital records and thinking about as people move away from fee-for-service and more towards a value-based care. So doctors are now, instead of just saying, you come to the office, that's $30 or whatever it is, they're looking at, okay, well, we did this treatment plan, and now you've had this new result. So they're actually tracking people's progress and the outcomes of the procedures, and then they are trying to provide more value instead of just taking money and being transactional. So as they do that, it really bleeds into more how do you make sure people are doing the right thing at home, when they're not in the office, and how do you help them in other places. So it's pushing out of the doctor's office into more service experiences and more consumer driven experiences, right? Because now they could be checking in on their health from their phone or something like that. So there's all these interesting kind of avenues that are opening up. So hopefully we'll get to work on that stuff.
Yeah, but it's also interesting because it's an area where obviously design can have impact and drive create better experiences for people really, and have a positive impact, right? I'm just wondering a little bit about maybe your personal feeling working now in that space compared to I guess in design consulting or even smart home, end of the day you drive business success, and it's still something you all still do, but at the same time there's a big portion of the business is really also aligned with solving something really big for people, right? So we're wondering a little bit how that feels for you as a designer, maybe compared to your old jobs. And
yeah, it feels great. I think a project that has always stuck with me was one that I did is just a pro bono work for there's a foster care facility, and so they were taking children they were the most at risk. They had been taken from their families, and they needed help. And so whenever I was at Mixer, we approached them and said, hey, we have these designers, how can we help? And they were like, what are industrial designers going to do with, foster children, right? But we ended up pulling in some people who had been involved with IDEO and some other firms, and we pulled together this team, and we started interviewing the people who worked at the facility, and we realized that they had this big need for this therapeutic space where kids could go and they could relax, and it would like take them out of this like heavy emotional state and get them to calm down. And so that was something that we had never done before. It was totally like, it was architecture and like materials and things like that. And it had such an impact on the kids' lives, and it changed the way that they were actually administering the therapy. And like it went from being this punishment to go to this room to now like the kids wanted to go there. And I'd always been looking for a way to get back to that kind of work, you know, and it turns out that there's not a lot of people that will pay you to do that. So it took a while.
Yeah,
it took a while.
But you found something, right?
And I think it really, like that transition, you know, unfortunately the transition away from industrial design, but more into a service and interaction design role, it really opened up a lot more opportunities in that space. And I think that, you know, because of that, and then working, you know, at Athena, like it's like actually moving that way. So it's been 10 years, but I'm getting there. Maybe eventually.
10 years since you started.
Yeah. Yeah, 10 years since that project, when I was like,
Yeah.
wow, like you can use these tools of design to like really affect positive change on people.
Yeah.
And now I actually get to do it. So
Yeah,
I'm excited
great.
about that.
Yeah. Ron, do you have any advice for people who maybe face a similar point in their career where they want to move from industrial to interaction design? Maybe some of your personal learnings on how to make this transition.
Yeah, I think for me, what went the easiest was research and like figuring out kind of like the big strategy. Like that was really, really easy. Like it felt very natural and very much like what you would do in an industrial design process, right? You go and you find a problem, and you do some research, and you talk to some people, and then you come up with concepts. And I think what really I had to learn was really just kind of foundational software skills that I just didn't have, coming from industrial design. Like you had to learn, what is information architecture? Like how do you arrange information? Like what are these patterns, and how do people navigate through the software? And then how do you make that a consistent experience that it feels, like it was all done at the same time, and it doesn't feel haphazard. And I think that was something that I just, it makes sense now. We'd like to look back at it. It was like, of course, like why didn't I know this? But I think I had never approached software in a systemic way like that. And I think that was something that I really had to, like that was the biggest learning curve for me. So I think if I was to, talk to someone about changing careers or doing that, like I would look initially at a place where, you could use those skills of strategy and research and concepting and like stay a little bit big picture for a while, and then try to find good mentors that can help you, really learn how to do these like foundational skills of information architecture and consistent interaction design.
It's interesting.
I think those are hard. It's hard. I think they're hard to read a book and then do it.
Yeah, sure.
Like it's hard to just like learn it and then just make it happen because everything is so different. But I think I think interaction design is still young enough of a profession that people are still very okay with you not knowing all the things and teaching you. So I think it's a good time, and I think there's a really good relationship between industrial design and interaction design at the moment.
There's been a lot of talk also about obviously the rise of value of design. You probably have seen the McKinsey report. Do you have any specific opinion on that, or?
I think that's something I'll probably know a lot more about soon, because what Athena is really good at is tracking metrics and like actually.
All right, that's interesting.
So they're able to say like, we made this change, and we know it. Like people found it this much faster, or that they were spending this much less time on the page, or that they did things right the first time more often. And that's something that you would never get to in consulting, because it's like it takes time and you have to go through revisions and roll things out slowly. But I think as an in-house product designer, like it's going to be really interesting to have those tools that I've never had before, and to really like validate decisions that I've made, and then to see like were they good, because probably a lot of them aren't. So it'll be interesting to be able to see that and to measure it and to track it, and that's something I'm really excited about that I've never been able to do before.
How many people working at athenahealth?
I think there are 6,000 total.
6,000. Right.
Mm-hmm. And
Probably still small enough to be very closely connected to customer insights and feedback and so on, right?
Yeah, they have a department called design operations.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of like DevOps, but it's design ops. And what these people do is they help develop these like shared tools and things that like I can contact design ops and say, hey, I want to do this test. And they say, great, like we have all of these protocols that you can use. We have the people that you can talk to. Like how many people do you need? What kind of timeline are you looking at? And so they just, like it's so much faster to get to where you don't have to build everything from the ground up. You just, they know who they're going to send the questions out to or the presentations. And I actually, while I've been here, they were doing one where they sent out a validation video and like sent some questions, and so whenever I get back to Austin, I'll be able to hear like how some of the changes have been, and that was all things that design ops had set up. Like it was, I just sent a video, and then they sent me a flyer, and I changed some. I'm sorry, not a flyer, a questionnaire, and I changed some questions, and then they just did it. It was like the easiest research I've ever done. It was incredible. So I'm looking forward to using that, and seeing like how that works. And I think next up is like actually going and talking to some physicians and like talking to the people that work, in the office and getting that kind of context, because I haven't gotten that yet.
But that's because you're not there long enough, probably, right?
Yeah.
But you guys as a design team have access to the customer, I assume, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. They have a few people who are so excited about making things better because they use the tool, right? So they want it to be better. So they're more than happy to invite us over and like talk to us and tell us what they don't like. So it's a really it's neat. I've never had that before. I've never had like a group of people that like really want to help and like are consistent, because I think that's something that we missed a lot even in the connected home space, is you would go talk to people and then you could never like go back to them and ask them like, is this what you wanted? We thought we heard this. Is this what you wanted? Because they were always different people.
Do you also use service design in your practice there?
Yeah, they are actually looking for a service designer right now to work in Austin. So I'm interested to see like how that plays in with the design team and like how that role gets utilized.
Because I think this is an interesting aspect. I think to it feels, at least to me, the project you guys are working on.
Yeah.
To really think about the journey there.
Yeah. That's something we did a lot of at Frog. Was working with the business strategist, and because of a lot of the projects that we had were more open. I guess we're not open, like there was a good definition, but they were earlier in the process. So we were able to say like, we think this is who you want to design for. We think this is what needs to happen. So that was it was definitely one of the things that Frog did a lot of.
Was there any interesting realizations here being at the IDC conference in terms of? It's an industrial design conference.
Yeah.
You actually,
but I think
at least it's a little bit connected to industrial. You now made the switch to interaction design.
Yeah.
How's it for you being here?
Well, I think it's interesting because I haven't been to an IDSA conference in probably 4 or 5 years. And it's been interesting to see that they are intentionally making the shift to be more, I guess, inclusive of people, with different backgrounds.
They saw you were doing it, so...
No, I don't think so. I think they saw the market was doing it, and that, people were... I don't know, it's interesting to see, who stays in industrial design and who, like, moves on. But yeah, I think it's a very interesting time. I feel like there's a lot of just, like, moving, and people are trying to learn like how to best use their skills and how to best solve problems, and it's interesting. I think the conference has been a good representation of that, right? Of this kind of ambiguous world that we're in now. Like, I think the topics are really interesting. Like how they're talking about, they're not talking about radii and materials. Like they're talking about like what is inclusion in design and what is these kind of bigger problems, so I think that they are starting to think more I guess, holistically and to think more strategically, and I think it's excellent. So I'm definitely major, like really happy with how Chris has taken it. So
yeah, we're just thinking of Michael Di Toulouse talk. I don't know if you saw it.
No, I missed it. He was at the same time I was.
Oh, okay. And he was talking about design language systems. But more from a holistic perspective, and obviously industrial design connected, right? And design language system in terms of like industrial design, but then also zooming out in terms of like aligning on taste, smell, and like other senses.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, that's something when we were working on medical devices, like to think about how do you create a design language not only with the form and the UI and that experience, but then like how do you fold sound into it, and like what is this family sound, and like how should it be, and it's really interesting to start to pull on more senses.
Yeah. When it comes to this intersection of industrial and interaction design, or maybe more connected to your if you say like you want to stay in complete interaction design, any big trends you see in that kind of space or hybrid space?
Yeah.
Or, I was wondering a little bit where you see it going.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's only going to happen more. I think that need, for a hybrid talent is just going to be more and more in demand, because I think it's just not enough to have a thing anymore. I think that all the things that we're using, these laptops and phones and all of these devices like that have a digital life, like they all need to be considered together, and because they do have such an impact on each other, like I think it's really hard for two people to do that, like they either need to be embedded and working on it at the same time, or there needs to be some kind of consistency between it. So there needs to be some kind of strong design leadership that is like making this consistency across the two experiences. And I think that's really hard in a lot of organizations because they're just not structured that way. Like there's the ID team and the interaction team, and I think that there's this room in the middle that really is a big opportunity for making kind of like this next generation of really tightly integrated products.
Yeah, you can agree or disagree, but I feel like there is there's this horizontal space between like industrial and interaction design, which there is obviously need now. But I guess there's also a lot of vertical space within each discipline to go really into detail, right?
Absolutely.
So like being actually really good, in getting things out and coming up with the final surface design and all of these topics. So I'm just and probably this connection where the intersections were very valuable. I think it's towards the whole design process, obviously, but I think maybe mostly in the beginning, right?
Absolutely.
Where it's more about setting the stage, looking on design strategy, I would almost say.
Yeah. I totally agree, and I think that's something that I've been trying to figure out is like how do you keep two careers going, right? Like how do you stay a good industrial designer and be a good interaction designer, and it's two different careers, right? It's like
you can go vertically, you can go quite deep, right?
Yeah, it's hard to be really good at both, right? I mean, you can't be spending all your time in CAD and then like still like making software. So I think you're right. Like it is the beginning of the process where you're understanding, how these two things are related and the kind of give and take of the decisions that you're making, and you understand like, oh well, if I say it's going to be this kind of interaction, that means this kind of screen, which means it's going to be this cost. And I think that there is that. This like space in the beginning where you can be both, but then eventually it does branch, and I think you have to have an expert, in each field.
Yeah, and what's also interesting, if we say beginning, right, at the moment, digital products obviously have a much quicker iteration cycle, and physical products, industrial design, have a slower one. Yeah. But what's also changing is if you look at rapid manufacturing, all kind of these topics, industrial design itself, at least that could be a prediction, will become much faster moving forward, right? So maybe at some point the iteration cycles will be more aligned, and then it's not just a touch point, talking about the horizontal connection between industrial and interaction design. It's not going to be just in the beginning of the process, but if the iteration cycles would actually align, you could have these point where you sort of align on both disciplines, like throughout a product improvement process. Right?
Yeah, the 3D printing stuff have gotten so good. I mean, it it makes me wonder if there could be like an agile industrial design cycle, right? Where you're like, I think this is what people want, and then here's a good enough model of it, and just take it out and test it, and like have some rough software experience that you take with you, and then just continue to iterate and revise, and then what you eventually make could be completely different than what you thought you needed, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we could do now that we just couldn't do even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Because I think the technology is it's so much better now. I've been amazed at the 3D prints that I see.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
and they're affordable. It's just,
Yeah.
it's a whole new world.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, as I agree to you. I think there will be a growing demand on that kind of area, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any maybe advice for you for a young industrial design student and maybe a young interaction design students on both sides, how to maybe emphasize with the other disciplines, or what to consider starting out?
Yeah, I think any industrial design student should probably be, in some degree, thinking about software. I don't think they have to be experts, but I think they need to like have an awareness and like understand that is a reality, and to kind of understand like how different physical interactions could manifest, into the product design. Touch screens versus buttons or things like that. But yeah, I think that as interaction designers, I think it's harder because the industrial design world is so focused on craft and just these like skills that you slowly grow, and I think it's good for them to understand that it is a different process, and that things don't happen as quickly. But I think there's a lot of overlap, I think, and it definitely feels like, I don't know. For me, it's been a fun space to be. I know it's got to be fun for you as well, like to be living this physical, digital world, where things are blending. But I don't know. I don't know what the future will be. I don't know if there will be a new kind of designer that comes out. But,
Yeah, there's a whole topic at the moment around the naming of design disciplines, like in the confusion or uncertainty. That's a better wording.
Yeah.
That's happening in the design industry, where people really don't know how to brand themselves or like name themselves and like be the right fit in the market. So that's a whole nother topic. So I think we are a little bit in a transition phase, in the phase of uncertainty when it comes to that.
I totally agree. And I think it's interesting because like I think interaction design is still so new, even though it's been around 20 years now or 30 years. I guess I'm trying to remember when like Tim Brown and Bill Moggridge were like they coined the term interaction design. I think that was in the early 90s maybe. But yeah, it's still a very new kind of scrappy career, and it's interesting to see where people come. They come from English backgrounds, or they come from history, and in industrial design, it's just this like strange place where people are like learning these skills and making new things. And it's exciting, I think.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing these insights. Really fascinating.
Thanks for having me. It's been really fun.
That was the episode. If you want to give us feedback on the podcast, have something to contribute to the next episode, or just want to get in touch, feel free to connect with us either on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram messages, or simply via the designdrives.org website. We love to hear from you.